Julian Vance had everything except someone who loved him for who he was. So the tech billionaire disguised himself as nobody, walked into the wrong alley, and met the right woman. Too bad she was already engaged to the man who would try to kill him. Welcome back to Proudly Black Stories, my beautiful, amazing Pride family. You all have been so supportive, and I promise to always try my best to give you the best stories as I learn and improve every day. If this is your first time coming across my video, do comment below where you're watching from and hit subscribe to officially join the Pride family. Now, let's get into today's story. The sunset over downtown Austin painted the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep violet, colors that should have been beautiful, but felt hollow to Julian Vance as he stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. $40 million this place had cost him. The view stretched across the entire city from the Colorado River, winding through downtown, to the hills that rolled endlessly toward the horizon. $4.7 billion sat in various accounts, investments, properties scattered across 3 continents. At 32 years old, he owned half the tech startups in Texas, had been featured on the cover of Forbes 6 times, and had presidents of companies twice his age calling to ask for his advice. He had never felt more empty in his entire life. Julian pressed his palm against the cool glass, watching the tiny cars below move like ants through the streets. People heading home to families, to friends, to lives that felt real. When was the last time anything had felt real to him? When was the last time someone had touched him without wanting something? Every woman who slid her hand into his at galas was calculating his net worth. Every smile at charity dinners came with an agenda. Every friendship was a transaction wrapped in pleasant conversation and expensive wine. His phone buzzed for the 47th time that day. He didn't need to look to know what it was. Investors wanting meetings, women he dated twice who suddenly needed help with their startup funding. Old college acquaintances who'd ignored him when he was nobody, but now wanted to get coffee and catch up. His father had died 3 years ago. The only person who'd known him before the money, before the success, before Julian Vance became a brand instead of a person. His mother had passed when he was 12. He was alone in a penthouse that could house 20 people comfortably, surrounded by art worth millions that he barely looked at anymore. The door to his private office opened, and Silas Reed walked in without knocking because he was the only person in Julian's life who had that privilege. 35 years old, his business partner since the beginning, the one friend who'd been there when they were coding in a garage and eating ramen for every meal. Silas took one look at Julian standing at the window inside. "You're doing that thing again?" Silas said, dropping into one of the leather chairs. "The brooding billionaire staring at the city thing. It's very dramatic, but also very concerning." Julian didn't turn around. "Do you remember what it felt like before all this? Before we had money you could actually sleep on and indoor plumbing that worked consistently?" Silas stretched his legs out. "Not particularly fondly. No. Before every person who looked at her saw dollar signs," Julian said quietly. "When someone laughed at your joke, it was because it was actually funny, not because they wanted something from you. When a woman went home with you, it was because she liked you, not because she was calculating how to become the next Mrs. Tech billionaire." Silas was quiet for a moment. "This is about Vanessa, isn't it?" Julian finally turned from the window. Vanessa had been the last woman he'd tried to date seriously. Beautiful, intelligent, worked in the non-profit sector, so he'd thought maybe, just maybe, she was different. They dated for 4 months before he'd overheard her on the phone with her friend, laughing about how she just had to hold out a little longer and she'd never have to worry about money again. The engagement ring he'd been carrying in his pocket for 2 weeks had gone back to the jeweler the next day. "It's about all of them," Julian said. "It's about realizing that no one has seen me, Just me in so long that I don't know if there's anything left to see. I could die tomorrow, and the headlines would be about my stock portfolio, not about who I actually was. Okay, Silas said slowly. You're officially scaring me now. Do I need to call someone? A therapist? Your doctor? Julian walked to his desk and pulled out the bottom drawer, removing a worn denim jacket and a pair of jeans that had seen better days. I'm going out. You're always going out. You went to that tech conference in San Francisco last week. Not like that, Julian said, starting to unbutton his $1,500 shirt. I'm going out as nobody, just a guy. I want to walk around and talk to people who don't know my name, don't want my money, don't see me as an opportunity. I want to see if anyone would care about me if I died broke. Silas sat up straight. You're going to get yourself killed playing dress-up in the real world. This isn't a movie where the billionaire goes undercover and finds true love at a coffee shop. This is Austin. And there are parts of this city where a guy wandering around alone at night is going to end up in an alley with a knife in his ribs. Julian pulled on the borrowed clothes, items he'd gotten from Mateo, the groundskeeper for his estate. Maybe that's the point. To see if I can feel something again. Fear, adrenaline, anything besides this. He gestured at the penthouse. This beautiful, expensive emptiness. Silas stood and grabbed Julian's shoulder. I'm serious. If you're having some kind of breakdown, we can get help. Real help. Not whatever this is. I'm not breaking down, Julian Clear's throat said. And he meant it. For the first time in months, he felt something like clarity. I'm waking up. I've been sleepwalking through a life that looks perfect from the outside, but feels like nothing from the inside. One night, Silas. Just give me one night to be nobody and see what it feels like. His best friend stared at him for a long moment, then sighed and released his shoulder. Take your phone. Keep it on. If you're not back by sunrise or I don't hear from you every 2 hours, I'm sending security to find you. Deal, Julian said. He left his Rolex on the desk, then paused and put it back on. It had been his father's, the only thing he had left that mattered. Some things you didn't leave behind, even when you were trying to disappear. He drove Mateo's beat-up truck, a 2008 Ford that rattled when it went over 40 mph through downtown and toward East Austin. The neighborhoods changed as he drove from sleek high-rises and trendy restaurants to areas where the buildings showed their age and the streetlights had gaps of darkness between them. He parked near East 6th Street and started walking. Just a guy in worn jeans and a denim jacket, hands in his pockets. No destination in mind. The city felt different from ground level. The smell of food trucks mixed with exhaust and the sweet scent of mountain laurel. Music spilled from open doors of bars where people laughed and argued and lived their lives. A group of college students stumbled past, debating whether to hit another bar or call it a night. An older man sat on a bench feeding pigeons, talking to them like old friends. A couple kissed against a graffitied wall, completely lost in each other. Julian watched them and felt his chest tighten. When was the last time he'd kissed someone and forgotten where he was? When was the last time anything had mattered more than the next meeting, the next deal, the next acquisition? He walked for an hour, just observing, and found himself outside a rundown convenience store with flickering fluorescent lights and bars on the windows. He went inside because he was thirsty, and because it was the kind of place he never went anymore. The clerk barely glanced at him. The aisles were narrow and the floor was cracked linoleum, but it was real in a way his world hadn't been for years. At the counter, a young woman counted quarters with shaking hands, while a little girl, maybe 5 years old, held her mother's leg and watched with huge dark eyes. The woman was trying to buy milk and bread, essentials, but she was coming up short. I'm sorry, the clerk said not unkindly. You're a $1.50 short. The woman's face crumpled. She started to put the milk back, but the little girl made a soft sound of distress. Mama, you said we could have cereal tomorrow. I know, baby, the woman whispered, and Julian could hear tears in her voice. We'll figure something out. The little girl looked around as if searching for a solution, and her eyes landed on Julian. She smiled at him. Clears throat. Just a pure, innocent smile that expected nothing and wanted nothing except maybe a smile back. When was the last time someone had smiled at him like that? Not the calculated smiles at business dinners or the flirtatious smiles from women at charity galas, but just a simple human smile that said, I see you, and that's enough. Julian's eyes burned. He stepped forward and put a $20 bill on the counter before the clerk could return the items. This should cover it, he said quietly, and the rest is for whatever else she needs. The woman turned to him with shock on her face. Sir, I can't. I don't. You don't have to do that. Already done, Julian said, and he was backing toward the door because if he stayed any longer, he might break down completely. The little girl waved at him, and he waved back. Then he was outside in the cooling night air, gulping in breaths and feeling something crack open in his chest. That was real. That moment of simple human kindness with no cameras, no press releases, no tax write-offs, just one person helping another because it was the right thing to do. He walked away from the convenience store feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. And he didn't notice the 3 men who'd been standing outside watching him. Didn't notice them pointing at his wrist where his father's watch caught the streetlight. Didn't notice them following him as he turned down a side street, looking for where he'd parked the truck. The night air smelled like rain coming, and Julian tilted his head back to look at the stars. You couldn't see them from his penthouse. Not really. Too much light pollution. But here in the darker parts of the city, a few brave stars pushed through. His phone buzzed, Silas's 2-hour check-in, and Julian pulled it out to text back that he was fine. Better than fine, actually, when a voice behind him made him freeze. Nice watch. Julian turned slowly. 3 men stood blocking the sidewalk behind him. The one who'd spoken had a neck tattoo that crawled up to his jaw, some kind of snake or dragon. The other 2 spread out slightly, boxing him in. What would you do if you were Julian in this moment? Run and risk looking like prey? Fight and risk serious injury or try to talk your way out and hope they're just testing you? It was my father's, Julian said evenly, not moving toward them or away. Not for sale. Wasn't asking to buy it, Neck Tattoo said, and the other 2 laughed, looking more like we'll just take it. Save us all some trouble and hand it over. Wallet, too. Julian's heart was pounding, but underneath the fear was something else, something sharp and clear. This was real. This was the most real thing he'd felt in years. No boardroom politics, no polite negotiations, just a clear and present danger that made every nerve in his body come alive. No, Julian said simply. Neck Tattoo's eyebrows went up. You're either brave or stupid, man. 3 of us, 1 of you. Math doesn't work in your favor. Maybe not, Julian said, and he could feel adrenaline singing through his veins. But the watch stays with me. You want to fight? Let's fight. But I'm not giving you the one thing I have left of my father. There was a moment where it could have gone either way. Then Neck Tattoo smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Your funeral. They came at him fast. Julian got in one good punch, felt his knuckles connect with someone's jaw before pain exploded across his back. Something hard, a pipe maybe, slammed into his spine, and he went down on one knee. A fist caught him in the mouth, and he tasted blood. He swung blindly, caught someone in the ribs, heard a grunt of pain. But 3 on 1, that math really didn't work in his favor. Boots slammed into his side. Hands grabbed his wrist, trying to rip the watch off. Julian fought like a wild thing, protecting that one precious item. Even as his vision started to blur, Another hit to his head, and the world tilted. He was on the ground now, curled around his wrist, blood pouring from his mouth. This is it, some distant part of his brain thought. This is how I die. Not in a boardroom or a hospital bed, but in an alley in East Austin over my father's watch. Then a voice cut through the sound of fists and boots, clear and strong, and absolutely unafraid. That's enough. Step back now. The beating stopped. Julian blinked through blood and saw a figure backlit by the streetlight at the alley entrance. A woman in scrubs like she'd just come from a hospital shift. She was holding up her phone, the camera clearly recording, and in her other hand was what looked like pepper spray. "I've got clear photos of all three of you," the woman said, and her voice had steel in it. "Leave now or I call the cops and you're looking at aggravated assault charges. With my testimony as a medical professional about his injuries, you're going away for years. Your choice. Make it fast." Neck Tattoo stood up, breathing hard. "This isn't your business." "I'm making it my business," she said, and Julian could see her finger hovering over her phone. 911 is one button away, and I've already uploaded these photos to the cloud, so breaking my phone won't help you. 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3. They ran, all three of them disappearing into the darkness like the cowards they were. The woman waited until their footsteps faded completely. Then she moved quickly to Julian's side, kneeling in the gravel and broken glass, like she didn't care about her scrubs getting dirty. "Can you hear me?" she asked, and her hands were already moving over him with professional efficiency, checking his head, his ribs, his limbs. Her touch was gentle despite the urgency. "Can you tell me your name?" "Julian," he managed, and more blood spilled from his split lip. Thank you. I'm okay." "You're not okay. You're bleeding from at least 3 places I can see," she said. But there was something almost warm under the brisk professional tone. "Can you stand? I need to get you under a streetlight to see how bad this is." She helped him to his feet, and the world spun, but her hands were steady on his arm, his waist, supporting more of his weight than someone her size should have been able to handle. Under the streetlight, Julian got his first clear look at her. Beautiful didn't cover it. She was stunning in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or expensive clothes. Natural hair pulled back in a ponytail, skin like warm earth, eyes that assessed him with intelligence and concern in equal measure, high cheekbones, full lips pressed together in concentration as she tilted his head to examine the cut above his eyebrow. She was maybe 28 or 29, and even exhausted from what had clearly been a long shift, she moved with purpose and grace. "This needs stitches," she said, pulling a tissue from her purse and dabbing at his bleeding lip with surprising tenderness. "The one above your eye definitely does. Can you see clearly? Any double vision?" "No," Julian said, staring at her. "Single vision. Very clear. You saved my life." "I stopped a mugging," she corrected, but a tiny smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. "Let me see your ribs." She pressed gently along his side, and Julian hissed in pain. "Possibly cracked," she said. "You need x-rays. There's an ER 5 blocks from here. I can drive you or we can call an ambulance." "No," Julian said quickly. "No hospitals. I'll be fine." She sat back on her heels and gave him a look that clearly said she dealt with stubborn patients regularly. "You possibly have cracked ribs. You definitely need stitches in 2 places, and you might have a concussion. You need a hospital." "I'll go tomorrow," Julian lied. I need to go home." She studied him for a long moment, and Julian felt like she was seeing past his words to the truth underneath. "Fine," she said finally. "But if you start vomiting, having vision problems, or lose consciousness, you get yourself to an ER immediately. Head injuries are nothing to mess around with." "I will," Julian promised. He fumbled in his pocket for his wallet. Please, let me give you something. A reward for helping me." Her expression went from concerned to cool in an instant. "I don't want your money. I did this because it's the right thing to do, not because I expect payment." Something in Julian's chest expanded and contracted at the same time. When was the last time someone had refused his money? When was the last time someone had done something kind and expected nothing in return? "At least let me know your name," he said. "Please, so I can thank you properly." "That's not important," she said, standing and offering him a hand up. "You should get home. Be more careful next time. This neighborhood isn't safe after dark." She started to walk away, and panic flared in Julian's chest. He couldn't let her disappear. Not this woman who'd walked into danger to save a stranger who'd refused his money, who touched him with gentle hands and seen him as just a person who needed help. "Do you know who I am?" he called after her. She turned back, studying his face in the streetlight with those intelligent eyes, really looking at him like she was trying to place him. Then she shook her head slowly. "No," she said simply, "and I don't need to. Take care of yourself." She walked away into the night, and Julian stood alone in the alley, blood on his shirt and dripping from his lip, his ribs screaming and his head pounding. He should feel terrible. He should be calling Silas and his security team and probably the police. Instead, he felt more alive than he had in a decade. No one had ever looked at him like that. Like he was just a man, not a bank account, not a connection, not an opportunity, just a man who'd needed help and received it freely. His heart was racing in a way that had nothing to do with the adrenaline from the fight and everything to do with the woman who just disappeared around the corner. He pulled out his phone and texted Silas. "I'm okay. Heading back soon, and I think I just met the most remarkable woman in the world." Silas's response came immediately. "You're definitely concussed. Get to a hospital." But Julian was already walking toward where he'd parked the truck, his mind full of dark eyes and gentle hands and a voice that had said, "That's enough," with the kind of authority that made grown men run. He didn't know her name, didn't know anything about her except that she was a medical professional based on the scrubs, and that she'd saved him without wanting anything in return. It was enough. It had to be enough for now. In her car 6 blocks away, Elena Hayes sat gripping the steering wheel and trying to stop her hands from shaking. She just walked into a 3-on-1 fight with nothing but pepper spray and her phone camera. She could have been killed, should have been killed, or at least badly hurt. But when she'd seen them beating that man, something in her had snapped. She'd lost her brother Leo because no one had helped when he needed it. She'd become a nurse specifically so she could be the person who helped. And she wasn't about to walk past someone being beaten to death in an alley just because it was dangerous. But God. Her hands were shaking now that it was over. Her phone buzzed and she looked down at a text from Sterling Brooks, her fiancé. "Where are you? You were supposed to be home an hour ago. We need to discuss the wedding budget again." Elena closed her eyes and felt exhaustion wash over her. Sterling. The wedding. The endless discussions about budgets and guest lists, and his opinions on everything from her dress to her hair to how many shifts she should work at the hospital because a wife needed to be available for her husband. She texted back, "Just finished shift. On my way." She didn't mention the alley, the fight, the stranger with blood on his face who'd looked at her with charming eyes just for helping him. She was too tired to deal with Sterling's questions, his concerns that would somehow become criticisms, his way of making everything about him. She drove home to the apartment she shared with him and tried not to think about dark eyes and a voice that had said, "Thank you," like she'd given him something precious instead of just basic human decency. For 3 days, Julian thought about her constantly. He sat in business meetings and saw her face. He reviewed acquisition proposals and heard her voice. He stood at his penthouse window at sunset and wondered where she was, what she was doing, if she ever thought about the man she'd saved in an alley. Silas noticed. Of course, Silas noticed. "You're obsessed," his best friend said, sprawled on Julian's obscenely expensive couch, while Julian paced. "You don't even know her name." "I know she's brave," Julian said. "I know she's kind. I know she helps people without expecting anything back. I know she looked at me like I was just a person, not a bank account." "You know she's probably married with 3 kids and you've built up some fantasy in your head," Silas countered. "Let it go. It was a moment. A nice moment, but just a moment." Julian stopped pacing. "Find her." Silas sat up. "What?" "You heard me. We have security footage from the area. We can pull traffic cameras. We can track her route, find out who she is." "Julian, that's borderline stalking." "I don't care," Julian said, and he meant it. "I've spent 10 years meeting women who want my money, my connections, my status. I met one woman who wanted nothing from me except to make sure I was okay. One woman who looked at me and saw a person worth saving. I'm not letting that go. I can't." Silas stared at him for a long moment. "You're serious about this?" "More serious than I've been about anything in years. It took his security team exactly 36 hours to find her. They pulled traffic camera footage, ran facial recognition, tracked her car to a hospital parking lot. When they brought Julian the file, his hands trembled as he opened it. Elena Hayes, 28 years old, ER nurse at Crestwood Medical Center, lived in a modest apartment in Pflugerville. And there, in black and white in the report, the detail that made his stomach drop: engaged to Sterling Brooks, wedding planned for 3 months from now. Julian stared at the engagement photo included in the social media report. Elena smiled in the picture, but it didn't reach her eyes the way her smile had flickered in the alley when she'd said, "I stopped a mugging." The man beside her was handsome in a calculated way. Expensive suit, arm around her shoulders possessively. He should walk away. She was engaged, spoken for, building a life with someone else. The right thing, the decent thing would be to let her go and remember her as a beautiful moment of human kindness. Julian closed the file and looked at Silas. "Where does she get coffee before her shifts?" "For the love of—" Silas started, then stopped when he saw Julian's face. "You're really going to do this?" "I have to at least try," Julian said quietly. "I have to know if what I felt in that alley was real or just adrenaline and desperation. And if she's happy, truly happy with this Sterling person, then I'll walk away. But I need to know." So he started appearing in her world carefully, casually, just a guy who happened to be in the same places. Bennu Coffee on East 6th Street, where she stopped before early shifts, always ordering a large coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. The Paperboy food truck park, where she ate lunch on her breaks, usually the Korean barbecue truck. The community health fair at the park, where she volunteered on her days off, checking blood pressures and handing out health information with infinite patience. Each time he was just Julian, worn jeans, normal shirts, nothing flashy. He tried to strike up conversations. She was polite, but distant, clearly not recognizing him from the dark alley. Her focus was always elsewhere, on her phone or her food or the people she was helping. Until one morning at Bennu Coffee 1 week after the alley when she was waiting for her order, and Julian was pretending to read a newspaper at a nearby table. She glanced over at him and did a double take. He saw the moment recognition flickered across her face. She walked over to his table, head tilted slightly. "Wait," she said. "You're the guy from the alley. Your lip, it's still healing." Julian looked up and his heart kicked into overdrive. She remembered him. "You remember me?" "Yes," Elena said, and her expression had softened slightly from the professional distance she usually maintained. "How are you feeling?" Any complications from those ribs?" "Better?" Julian said, standing up because his mother had raised him right. "Thanks to you. Can I buy you coffee? As a thank you, and I won't take no for an answer." She checked her watch, clearly calculating. "I have 20 minutes before my shift." "Deal," Julian said, trying not to smile too wide. They sat at a corner table, and for the first time since the alley, they actually talked. Julian asked questions, genuine ones because he wanted to know everything about her. Why she became a nurse, why she volunteered at health fairs, what she loved about Austin. "My younger brother Leo," Elena said, and her voice went soft and sad. "He died when I was 17. Asthma attack. We couldn't afford his medication that month." She stopped, swallowed hard, and Julian reached across the table instinctively to touch her hand. She didn't pull away. "He died on our living room floor while we waited for an ambulance that came too late." She continued, and her voice cracked. "I became a nurse, so no one else's brother dies while people count pennies. I save people because I couldn't save Leo." "You're the most remarkable person I've ever met," Julian said quietly, intensely, leaning forward so she could see the truth in his eyes. Elena looked surprised, vulnerable, like no one had ever said anything like that to her before. "You don't even know me. But I know enough to know that you're a good woman with the kindest of hearts." The air between them crackled with something electric. Elena's breath caught, and her lips parted slightly. For a moment, one perfect moment, she looked like she wanted to kiss him. Her eyes were on his mouth, then back to his eyes. And Julian felt like if he leaned forward just 6 inches, he could kiss her, and she might maybe kiss him back. Then a voice shattered the moment like a hammer through glass. "Elena, who's your friend?" They both turned. A man stood beside their table, tall and handsome, in an expensive charcoal suit that Julian recognized as bespoke tailoring. This had to be Sterling Brooks. He slid an arm around Elena's shoulders possessively before she could stand, and extended his other hand to Julian with a smile that didn't reach his calculating eyes. "I'm Sterling," he said smoothly, "Elena's fiancé." Julian stood and shook his hand, matching his grip strength for strength. "Julian, nice to meet you." Elena looked flustered, guilty, even though she'd done nothing wrong. "Sterling, this is the man I told you about from the alley, the one who got mugged?" But Julian had never told her about the mugging, only that she'd helped him. She must have pieced it together. Sterling's smile widened, but his eyes went cold. "Ah, yes, the Good Samaritan story. My Elena, always helping strays. I hope you thanked her properly." "I tried," Julian said evenly. "She wouldn't accept anything." "That's my girl," Sterling said, squeezing Elena's shoulder just a bit too tight. "Impossibly noble." "Darling, we should go. You'll be late for your shift." "I have 15 minutes, Elena said, but she was already standing, already pulling away from the table. "It was nice seeing you again, Julian. Take care of yourself." "You too," Julian said, holding her gaze for one more second. When Elena excused herself to the restroom, Sterling leaned across the table, his pleasant expression dropping like a mask. His voice went low and hard. "I don't know what you're playing at, but Elena is taken. Move along." "Does she know you're this controlling?" Julian asked quietly, meeting his eyes. "Does she know you've been following her for days?" Sterling countered. "Yes, I noticed. The coffee shop, the food trucks, the health fair. I notice everything when it comes to what's mine. Stay away from her." He straightened as Elena returned, the pleasant mask sliding back into place seamlessly. "Ready, darling." They left together, Sterling's hand on her lower back, guiding her out. But Elena looked back once, caught Julian's eyes, and there was something in her expression. Sadness, longing, maybe even a silent apology. It told Julian everything he needed to know. She wasn't happy. Whatever life she'd built with Sterling Brooks, it wasn't making her eyes light up the way they had when she talked about saving people. Julian sat back down and pulled out his phone. He should walk away. This was messy, complicated, potentially destructive. But when had he ever walked away from something he wanted? When had he ever let difficulty stop him from pursuing what mattered? Never. And he wasn't starting now. In his car outside the coffee shop, Sterling made a phone call while Elena sat silent in the passenger seat, staring out the window. "I need a full background check on someone," Sterling said to whoever answered. "Mid-30s, brown hair, well-built, showing up wherever my fiancé goes. Find out who he is and what he wants. And I need it yesterday." For 1 week, Julian tried to respect her engagement. He threw himself into work, took meetings in San Francisco and New York, tried to pretend that he hadn't met someone who made every other woman pale in comparison. Silas thought he'd finally come to his senses. Then his private investigator, hired initially just to find Elena, sent him a file he hadn't asked for. Security footage from the Four Seasons Hotel downtown stamped 4 days ago. Julian almost deleted it without watching, but something made him click play. The video showed Sterling Brooks entering the hotel elevator with a blonde woman. They were laughing, standing too close. Then Sterling pulled her in and kissed her deep and passionate. They stumbled out of the elevator on the 8th floor, barely breaking apart, and disappeared into a room together. Julian watched the footage 3 times, feeling sick. This was while Sterling was engaged to Elena, while he was calling her my girl and darling and acting like the devoted fiancé. The timestamp showed they'd stayed in that room for 4 hours. Julian stared at his phone for 2 hours. The video file open, his thumb hovering over Elena's number that he absolutely shouldn't have, but had acquired anyway. This would break her heart, destroy her engagement, shatter whatever future she'd planned with this man. But letting her marry a cheater would be worse. Letting her build a life with someone who betrayed her, that would be a cruelty Julian couldn't live with. He drove to Crestwood Medical Center and waited in the parking lot like a stalker, like exactly the kind of obsessed person Silas had warned him against becoming. But when Elena emerged at 11 p.m., exhausted from her shift, her scrubs wrinkled and her hair falling out of its ponytail, Julian got out of his truck and walked toward her. She saw him and stopped, weariness crossing her face. "Julian, what are you doing here?" "I need to show you something," Julian said, and his voice was rough with emotion he couldn't hide. "And I'm sorry because it's going to hurt, but you need to see it." He held out his phone, the video already queued up. Elena looked at the screen, then at him, then back at the screen. She took the phone with trembling hands. Julian watched her face as she watched the footage, saw the exact moment she recognized Sterling, saw her face drain of color, saw tears start to slip down her cheeks as she watched the man she was supposed to marry kiss another woman disappear with her into a hotel room. The phone slipped from her hands. Julian caught it. Caught her as her knees buckled, his arms going around her to keep her upright. "Why?" Elena whispered, and her voice was broken. "Why would you show me this? Why do you even care?" "Because you saved my life in that alley," Julian said, holding her tight, one hand cradling her head against his chest. "And I can't stand by and watch you give yours to someone who doesn't deserve you." "You don't know me," Elena said, but she was sobbing now, her hands clutching his shirt. "You don't know what I deserve." Julian pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, tilting her head up so she had to look at him. The parking lot lights cast shadows across her beautiful, tear-stained face. "I know you deserve someone who looks at you like you're the only person in the world," Julian said. And every word came from the deepest part of his soul. Someone who would burn his entire life down just to keep you warm. Someone who sees you, really sees you, and knows they'll never find anyone else like you. I know you deserve that because that's how I felt about you since the moment you walked into that alley and saved me." Elena sobbed harder, and Julian pulled her back against his chest, holding her while she cried under the Texas stars. She cried for the betrayal, for the wasted time, for the future she'd planned that turned out to be built on lies, and Julian held her through all of it, his heart breaking and mending at the same time because she was in his arms, and he would do anything, give anything to take away her pain. What they didn't see was the man in a car 3 rows over photographing the entire exchange. He sent the photos to Sterling immediately with a message. "Found him. Julian Vance, tech billionaire worth $4.7 billion, and he's very close to your girl." Sterling stared at the photo of Julian holding Elena, his expression turning dark and dangerous. "So that's his game," he muttered. "Billionaire thinks he can buy my fiancée. We'll see about that." He made another call. "I need a message sent. Make it painful but not permanent. I want him to understand what happens when you touch what belongs to me." Elena went home that night to the apartment she shared with Sterling. Her eyes swollen from crying, her heart shattered into pieces. When she walked in, Sterling was waiting on the couch with a glass of wine, looking perfectly composed. "You're late," he said mildly. "I know about Isabella," Elena said. No preamble, no gentle lead-in. She was too tired and heartbroken for games. She expected denial, excuses, apologies, but Sterling just smiled and set down his wine glass carefully. "And I know about Julian Vance," he said. He threw printed photographs onto the coffee table. Elena and Julian at Bennu Coffee, at the food truck park, in the parking lot with Julian's arms around her while she cried. High-quality photos clearly taken by someone following her. "How long have you been—" "Him?" Sterling asked conversationally. Elena felt like she'd been slapped. "Not everyone is a gigolo like you, Sterling," she said. "You're the one who cheated." "Did I?" Sterling stood and walked toward her slowly. "Or did I turn to someone else because I felt you pulling away, because you stopped looking at me and started looking for excuses to run into your billionaire boyfriend?" "He's not my boyfriend," Elena said. "I just met him a few weeks ago." Sterling picked up one of the photos, the one of Julian holding her. "This looks pretty intimate for someone you just met. Secret coffee dates, lunch breaks together, and now he's comforting you in parking lots at midnight. You think I'm stupid?" "Yes, I absolutely think you're stupid. You're being ridiculously insane right now." Elena said, "You're trying to make me the villain when you're the one who was in a hotel room with another woman." Sterling's mask cracked slightly, rage flashing across his face. "Maybe I turned to Isabella because you stopped being enough. Because you're so busy saving strangers and working double shifts that you forgot you had a fiancé at home who needed you." Needed me? Elena felt her own anger rising. Or needed my money, because that's what this has been about, hasn't it? Sterling went very still. "Who told you that?" "No one had to tell me." Elena lied. "I figured it out myself. The timing of when we met, how you pursued me so intensely. You targeted me, Sterling. This whole relationship was a con." For a moment, genuine emotion crossed Sterling's face. Something that might have been hurt if Elena hadn't known better. "It started that way," he admitted, and Elena's stomach dropped, even though she'd already known. "But I did love you, Elena. In my way. I built a life for us. A life built on lies." Elena said, "I'm done, Sterling. The engagement is off. I'll move out tomorrow." She turned toward their bedroom to start packing, Clear's throat. But Sterling's voice stopped her cold. "You don't get to walk away from me. Not after everything I've invested in you. Not after 2 years of playing the devoted fiancé to a woman who can't even afford decent coffee without counting pennies." Elena turned back slowly. "I'm not a business deal. I'm a person, and I'm leaving." Sterling's expression turned to ice. "We'll see how you feel when I'm done. And your billionaire boyfriend, he'll regret the day he decided to play hero. I guarantee it." "Is that a threat?" "That's a promise," Sterling said softly. Elena grabbed essentials, threw them in a bag with shaking hands, and left. She drove to Maya Thorne's apartment across town, her best friend since college, and collapsed on the couch in tears. Maya held her while she cried, stroking her hair and making soothing sounds. When Elena could finally speak, she told her everything. Sterling is cheating, Julian showing her the footage, the confrontation, Sterling's threats. "You did the right thing," Maya said firmly. "He's a manipulative piece of garbage, and you're better off without him." "What if he's right, though?" Elena whispered. "What if I did have feelings for Julian before I ended things? What if I emotionally cheated?" "Even if you did develop feelings, which is completely human and normal, you ended your engagement before acting on them. Maya said you didn't cheat." "Elena, you recognized you had feelings for someone else, and you did the right thing by ending your relationship. That's called being honest, not cheating." Elena pulled out her phone with trembling hands and texted Julian. "Thank you for showing me the truth. I ended things with Sterling. I don't know what happens next. But thank you." 3 blocks away in his penthouse, Julian read the text, and his heart started racing. He wrote and deleted 6 different responses before settling on, "Are you safe? Do you need anything?" Elena's response came quickly. "I'm safe at my friend's place." Julian typed, "Take all the time you need. I'm here whenever you need me." He wanted to write more, wanted to confess, clear his throat, everything, his wealth, his feelings, his certainty that she was the one person in the world who could make him feel whole. But she needed space, and he would give her that, even if it killed him. 3 nights later, Julian was leaving a late meeting at his downtown office building. The parking garage was nearly empty, just the echo of his footsteps and the hum of fluorescent lights. He'd been working late every night, throwing himself into acquisition deals and merger negotiations to avoid thinking about Elena constantly. It wasn't working. As he approached his car, a modest sedan he'd bought to maintain some of his regular guy persona, 4 men emerged from behind concrete pillars. Julian recognized the setup immediately, had half a second to decide between running for the elevator or standing his ground. He chose to stand because running felt like defeat. They didn't speak, didn't demand his wallet or his watch. They just attacked fast and brutal and clearly professional. These weren't random muggers. This was a message. Brass knuckles caught him across the jaw, and Julian tasted blood. A steel-toed boot slammed into his ribs, and he heard something crack. He fought back, got in a few good hits because his father had insisted he learn to defend himself, but 4-on-1 with weapons wasn't a fight he could win. A pipe across his back drove him to his knees. Fists rained down on his head, his sides, his face. He curled up, trying to protect his vital organs while they beat him systematically, professionally, like they'd done this before. The leader, a massive guy with hands like hammers, crouched beside Julian's blooded face and grabbed his hair, forcing his head up. "Message from Sterling," the man said calmly. "Stay away from what's his or next time we kill you." He let Julian's head drop, and they left, their footsteps echoing away into the concrete silence. Julian lay there bleeding on the oil-stained garage floor, every breath sending fire through his broken ribs. His phone was in his pocket. 1 call and his security team would be here in minutes. 1 call, and he could have these men tracked, identified, arrested. 1 call, and he could unleash the full power of his wealth and connections to destroy Sterling Brooks completely. But he didn't call because some stubborn, possibly stupid part of him wanted to prove he was more than his money. Wanted to show Elena and maybe himself that he could be brave without billions of dollars to back him up. that he could take this punishment and still stand on his own 2 feet. Literally standing seemed impossible at the moment, but the principle remained. 20 minutes passed before a parking attendant found him. The older man took one look at Julian's battered face and immediately called 911. Julian tried to wave him off, tried to say he was fine, but blood bubbled from his lips and the words wouldn't come. As paramedics loaded him onto a gurney, one of them asked, "Which hospital?" "Crestwood," Julian whispered through split lips. "Take me to Crestwood Medical Center." The paramedic looked confused. There were closer hospitals, but Julian repeated it with what little strength he had left. "Crestwood, please." Because if he was going to lie in a hospital bed, broken and bleeding, he wanted even the smallest chance that she might be the one to find him. The ambulance arrived at Crestwood Medical Center at 11:43 p.m. Sirens wailing through the emergency bay entrance. Elena was halfway through her shift, exhausted but focused when the overhead announcement crackled to life. Incoming trauma, male, mid-30s, assault victim, multiple injuries, ETA 2 minutes. She moved automatically toward the trauma bay, pulling on fresh gloves and tying her hair back more securely. This was her element, the organized chaos of emergency medicine where she could focus all her energy on saving lives instead of thinking about her imploded engagement or the billionaire who'd shown her the truth or the threatening text messages Sterling kept sending that she kept deleting. The doors burst open and paramedics wheeled in the gurney at speed, rattling off vitals as they moved. Male patient approximately 32 years old found unconscious in parking garage. Signs of severe beating, suspected broken ribs, possible concussion, lacerations to face and head. Elena moved to the side of the gurney as they transferred the patient to the trauma bed, her hands already reaching to assess injuries. Then she saw his face. The world stopped. "Julian," she breathed, and professional detachment shattered completely. "Oh my God, Julian!" His face was barely recognizable under the swelling and blood. His left eye was swollen shut, a gash above his eyebrow still bleeding freely. His lip was split in 2 places, his nose clearly broken. But it was him, unmistakably him, the man who'd looked at her in a coffee shop like she was something precious. "You know this patient?" one of the other nurses asked. Elena's hands were already moving over him, checking his airway, his breathing, his circulation, even as tears blurred her vision. "Yes, I know him. Julian. Julian, can you hear me?" His one good eye fluttered open, unfocused, and glazed with pain. When he saw her face above him, something like a smile tried to form on his destroyed lips. "Hey," he whispered, voice slurred and weak. "You saved me again." "Don't talk," Elena said, and her voice broke completely. "Just stay with me. Stay with me, Julian." "Would do this," he mumbled, fading in and out of consciousness. 100 times just to hear you say my name like that." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. He'd been beaten within an inch of his life, and he was trying to flirt with her, trying to make her smile, even though every word clearly caused him agony. "You're an idiot," she sobbed, even as her hands worked with professional precision. "You're the bravest, most stubborn, most idiotic man I've ever met." The team swarmed around them. Someone called for X-rays. Someone else started an IV. A doctor barked orders about CT scans and possible internal bleeding. Elena worked through her tears, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt to examine his torso. The bruising was extensive, purple and black across his ribs and abdomen. When she pressed gently to check for internal injuries, Julian made a sound of pain that tore her heart in half. I'm sorry, she whispered. "I need to check. I need to make sure you're okay." Julian's hand, the one without the IV, reached up and caught her wrist weakly. "Hey, relax. Whatever happened wasn't your fault," he managed. "I'm going to be fine." Who did this to you? Elena asked, even though somewhere deep down she already knew. Why didn't you call for help? Why didn't you protect yourself? Because I'm not. Julian's eye was closing again. Who you think I am, and I wanted just once to be brave enough, without money, to save me. The words made no sense. But before Elena could ask what he meant, Julian lost consciousness completely. The monitors started screaming, and the team moved into crisis mode. They rushed him to X-ray, then CT scan, then finally to a recovery room once they'd confirmed no internal bleeding, 3 broken ribs, fractured nose, severe concussion, multiple contusions, but nothing immediately life-threatening. Elena followed every step of the way, ignoring her supervisor's pointed looks about emotional involvement with patients. She held Julian's hand while they set his nose, stayed beside him during the scans, refused to leave even when her shift technically ended at midnight. She was sitting in the chair beside his bed in the general recovery ward, holding his hand and crying silently, when a man in an expensive suit burst through the door, looking like he was ready to murder someone. "Where is he?" the man demanded. "Where's Julian Vance?" The name hit Elena like ice water. Vance. Julian Vance. Why did that sound familiar? The man, tall and distinguished-looking despite his obvious fury, spotted Julian in the bed, and his expression crumbled. "Jesus Christ, Julian, what the hell did you do?" He moved to the other side of the bed, taking in the extent of Julian's injuries with growing horror. When he looked up at the charge nurse who'd followed him in, his voice was steel. "Move him to the VIP wing. Private room, best doctors. Cost is irrelevant." "Sir," the nurse said carefully, "he doesn't have VIP insurance listed in our system." "He's Julian Vance," the man said, biting off each word. "He owns the company that donated the entire west wing of this hospital. He's worth $4.7 billion. Move him to VIP immediately or I'll have your jobs, and this entire hospital's board replaced by morning." The nurse went pale and scurried away. Elena sat frozen in her chair, still holding Julian's hand. $4.7 billion. Julian Vance, the tech mogul. The man finally seemed to notice her. "Who are you?" "Elena," she said numbly. "I'm a nurse here. I've been treating him." The man's expression softened slightly. "Silas Reed. I'm Julian's business partner and best friend. Thank you for taking care of him." "Why didn't he call for help?" Elena asked. "The paramedic said he was conscious when they found him. He could have called security, called you, but he didn't. Why?" Silas looked at Julian's battered face with something like exasperated affection. "Because he's noble and stubborn, and occasionally incredibly stupid. Plus, I think he likes you." "He doesn't even know me," Elena whispered. "He knows enough," Silas said. "And trust me, I've known Julian for 15 years. I've never seen him like this about anyone." Hospital administration arrived then, falling over themselves to apologize and arrange the transfer to the VIP wing. Elena watched in a daze as they moved Julian to a private suite that looked more like a luxury hotel room than a hospital, soft lighting, comfortable furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the city. She should leave. Her shift was over. Julian was in good hands, but when she tried to make herself stand up and walk away, her body refused to cooperate. "You should stay," Silas said quietly from the doorway. "When he wakes up, you're who he'll want to see." "I don't understand any of this," Elena said. "He's a billionaire. What was he doing in that alley the night I found him? What was he doing at coffee shops and food trucks? Why did he pretend to be someone he's not? If you discovered someone you were falling for had been hiding the fact that they're a billionaire, would you feel betrayed by the deception?" "I think you should ask him that when he wakes up," Silas said. "But for what it's worth, everything he felt for you was real. The money just complicated things." Silas left, promising to return in the morning. Elena sat in the quiet luxury of the VIP suite, holding Julian's hand, and pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. She typed Julian Vance into the search bar. The results were overwhelming. Forbes articles about his net worth, profiles in business magazines, photos of him at charity galas in tuxedos that cost more than her monthly rent. Julian Vance, tech, clear-throat genius, who'd built an empire before he was 30. Julian Vance, one of Austin's most eligible bachelors. Julian Vance, billionaire philanthropist. She looked from the photos on her phone to the man in the hospital bed, his face so swollen and damaged she could barely see the handsome features from the magazine covers. This was the same person who'd stood in a coffee shop and asked to buy her a cup of coffee as a thank you. The same person who'd shown her footage of Sterling cheating because he couldn't stand to watch her marry someone who didn't deserve her. The same person who'd apparently been beaten nearly to death and refused to use his wealth and power to protect himself because he wanted to prove something. Elena didn't know whether to be furious or heartbroken or impossibly dangerously touched. She fell asleep in the chair beside his bed, her head resting on the mattress near his hand, too exhausted to process anymore. When Julian woke up, the first thing he registered was pain. Every inch of his body screamed in protest as consciousness returned. The second thing he registered was soft hair under his fingers, silky and natural, and the gentle sound of breathing that wasn't his own. He opened his one good eye, the other still too swollen, and saw Elena asleep beside his bed. She'd pulled the chair close and fallen asleep with her head on his mattress, one hand still loosely holding his. Even in sleep, she looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, her scrubs rumpled from a long shift. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Julian tried to speak, but his throat was dry as sand. He managed a soft sound, and Elena jolted awake immediately, nurse instincts kicking in. Her eyes met his and flooded with tears. "You're awake," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "How do you feel? Rate your pain 1 to 10. 11, Julian croaked. "Maybe 12. "That's not how the scale works," Elena said, but she was already reaching for the call button to get his pain medication adjusted. A nurse appeared within seconds, clearly assigned specifically to this VIP room, and administered medication through his IV. The pain began to recede to manageable levels within minutes. Julian watched Elena the entire time, drinking in the sight of her. The reality that she was here, that she'd stayed. "You stayed," he said when his voice started working better. Elena's expression shifted from concerned to something harder. "You're a billionaire." "Yeah," Julian said. "You pretended to be a regular guy. The truck, the clothes, the whole 'let me buy you coffee' thing. It was all pretending." "Not pretending," Julian said, trying to push himself up and immediately regretting it as his ribs screamed. "The opposite of pretending. That was the most real I've been in 10 years. Elena moved to adjust his pillows, helping him sit up despite her obvious anger because she was a nurse and couldn't help taking care of people even when they'd lied to her. "Don't move like that. You have 3 broken ribs." "I know," Julian said. "I can feel every one of them." She stepped back once he was settled, crossing her arms over her chest. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" "Because of exactly this," Julian said, gesturing between them. "Because the second people know I'm Julian Vance, tech billionaire, they stop seeing me and start seeing my bank account. You looked at me in that alley like I was just a man who needed help. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know what it's like to never know if someone likes you or your net worth?" "So you lied," Elena said. "I omitted," Julian countered. "And yes, that was wrong. I should have told you sooner. I was going to tell you a dozen times. But every time I opened my mouth, I remembered the way you refused my money that first night. The way you insisted on buying your own coffee. The way you looked at me like I was worth saving just because I was a person, not because of what I could give you." Elena's arms uncrossed slightly. Her expression was still guarded, but something was softening. "You took a beating because of me. Sterling did this." It wasn't a question. Julian nodded carefully, mindful of his pounding head. "He had you beaten nearly to death, and you didn't call for help. Didn't use your money or your power or your security team," Elena said. "Why?" "Because I wanted to prove I'm more than my wealth," Julian said quietly. "I wanted to be brave for you the way you were brave for me in that alley. I wanted to earn you, Elena. Not buy you, not impress you with what I have, but earn you with who I am." Tears slipped down Elena's cheeks. "You stubborn, stupid, beautiful man." "Is that a yes?" Julian asked, and despite the pain, he smiled with his ruined lips. "A yes to what?" "To letting me take you to dinner when I can walk again," Julian said. "To letting me prove that every word I've said to you was true. To letting me fall in love with you the right way." Elena wiped at her tears. "You're already in love with me, aren't you?" "Hopelessly," Julian admitted. "Since the alley. Maybe before. Maybe I was just waiting my whole life to be saved by you." "That's impossible," Elena said, but she was moving closer to the bed. "You didn't know me before." "Maybe I was waiting without knowing what I was waiting for," Julian said. "And then you walked into that alley and suddenly everything made sense. Every bad date, every failed relationship, every lonely night in that empty penthouse, it was all leading me to that moment. To you." Elena sat on the edge of his bed, careful not to jostle his injuries. She reached up and traced the edge of a bruise on his jaw with infinite gentleness. "I ended my engagement because of you. Because in 2 weeks you showed me what I should have felt for 2 years with Sterling. Because you looked at me like I mattered, like my thoughts and my dreams and my brother's memory were important, not just convenient facts to manipulate." "You ended it because he didn't deserve you," Julian said, catching her hand and pressing it to his chest where his heart was beating hard enough for her to feel. "I just helped you see what was already true." "I'm terrified," Elena whispered. "I'm terrified that this is too fast, too intense, too much. I'm terrified that I'm making another mistake." "Then be terrified with me," Julian said, "because I'm scared too. Scared you'll decide I'm not worth the complication. Scared this feeling is one-sided. Scared I'll wake up and you'll be gone." "I'm right here," Elena said. "Then stay," Julian said. "Please, just until I fall asleep. I need to know you're real." Elena leaned down slowly, telegraphing her movement, giving him time to protest. She pressed her lips to his forehead, the one spot that wasn't bruised or cut. It was the gentlest kiss, barely a brush of skin against skin, but Julian felt it like lightning through his entire body. "I'll stay," she promised, "as long as you need." Julian fell asleep holding her hand, and for the first time since the beating, he didn't have nightmares. The hospital insisted on keeping Julian for 3 days of observation, given the severity of his concussion. Elena worked her shifts and spent every break in his room. They talked for hours, real conversations where Julian told her about growing up with nothing, building his company from a garage, losing his father, and never quite filling that void. Elena told him about her family, her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat after her father left. Her brother Leo, whose memory drove everything she did. On the 3rd day, against medical advice and Silas's vocal protests, Julian checked himself out. He could barely walk without wincing, but staying in that hospital bed felt like wasting time he could spend with Elena. "I can't go back to my old apartment," Elena said, as they stood in the hospital lobby. "Sterling's name is on the lease and I don't feel safe there." "Maya's couch is too small for you to recover properly," Silas interjected. He'd been hovering like an overprotective mother hen since Julian had announced his intention to leave. I have a solution, Julian said carefully. I have a guest house on my estate. 2 bedrooms, fully furnished, private. You could stay there while you look for a permanent place. And he added, before she could protest, I need help recovering. Doctor's orders say I shouldn't be alone with these injuries. That's manipulation, Elena said, but she was smiling slightly. That's practical problem solving, Julian countered. You need a place to stay. I need medical supervision. We solve both problems. And what do I pay in rent? Elena asked, one eyebrow raised. Name your price, Julian said. $1 a month. Julian started to laugh, then stopped because his ribs protested violently. You drive a hard bargain. Deal. So Elena moved into the guest house, a modest 2-bedroom cottage by Julian's standards, but nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived. She worked her nursing shifts, came home to check on Julian, and slowly, carefully, they built something real. On the first night, Elena changed Julian's bandages while he sat shirtless on the couch. Her fingers were professional, efficient, but when she traced the edge of a bruise, Julian's breath caught in a way that had nothing to do with pain. You have healing hands, he said quietly. That's literally my job, Elena replied, but her cheeks flushed. No, Julian said, catching her wrist gently. You have a healing soul. Every time you touch me, I feel less broken, and I'm not talking about the ribs. Elena's hands stilled. That's the pain medication talking. I stopped taking the pain meds yesterday, Julian said. That's just truth. Their eyes locked, and the air between them thickened. Elena pulled away, flustered, claiming she needed to wash the gauze. But Julian saw the way her hands trembled slightly, the way her breathing had quickened. On the 3rd day, Elena insisted on cooking Nigerian jollof rice, her grandmother's recipe. Julian, despite his injuries, insisted on helping. They worked side by side in the kitchen, and Julian couldn't remember the last time anything had felt this domestic, this right. You're terrible at chopping onions, Elena laughed, as Julian produced another unevenly sized piece. I'm a billionaire who can't cook, Julian said. Shocking, I know. Elena bumped him with her hip playfully. So, I'm worth your terrible chopping skills? Julian put down the knife and turned to face her fully. You're worth everything I have and everything I am. The laughter died in Elena's eyes, replaced by something intense and vulnerable. Don't say things like that. Why not? Because I'm starting to believe them, Elena whispered. Good, Julian said, and he reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, and Elena's eyes fluttered closed at the touch. They stood there inches apart, the rice burning slightly on the stove. Neither moved. Then Elena's phone rang, Maya checking in, and the moment shattered, but the tension remained, building like a storm that would eventually have to break. On the 5th night, Julian woke up screaming. Nightmares of the beating of fists and boots and pain had him thrashing in the sheets. Elena ran into his room in an oversized t-shirt and shorts, panicked. Julian, you're safe, she said, sitting on the edge of his bed and taking his hands. You're safe. I'm here. Julian was covered in sweat, breathing hard, his heart racing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. Don't apologize, Elena said firmly. Trauma is trauma. It doesn't follow convenient schedules. She started to stand to leave him to calm down on his own. But Julian gripped her hand tighter. Stay, he said, and his voice cracked on the word. Please, just until I fall back asleep. Elena knew she should say no. This crossed lines, blurred boundaries that should stay clear, but she couldn't leave him like this, shaking and afraid. Okay, she said softly. Just until you sleep. She lay down on top of the covers beside him, fully clothed. Julian curled toward her instinctively, his head coming to rest near her shoulder. Elena hesitated, then began running her fingers through his hair, slow and soothing. "I've never felt as safe as I do when you're near me," Julian whispered. "Then I'll stay as long as you need," Elena promised. They fell asleep like that, not touching beyond her hand in his hair, but more intimate than any physical encounter Elena had ever had. When she woke at dawn, Julian was wrapped around her, his head on her chest, his arm over her waist, sleeping peacefully. She should move. She should go back to her own room before this became something neither of them were ready for. But she didn't. She lay there holding him, and admitted to herself what she'd been denying for days. She was in love with him, completely, terrifyingly, irrevocably in love with Julian Vance. On the 7th evening, they were watching an old movie on the couch, The Princess Bride, Julian's choice. Elena was curled under his arm, careful of his healing ribs, and the movie was ending. "You know what my favorite part is?" Julian asked, as the credits rolled. "The sword fighting?" Elena guessed, looking up at him. "As you wish," Julian said. "The way Wesley loves Buttercup so completely that her happiness is his only goal. The way he says, 'as you wish,' but means 'I love you' every single time. That's what real love is. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, just seeing someone and choosing their happiness above your own." Elena shifted to see his face better. "You're a romantic." "Only for you," Julian said, looking down at her with such naked emotion that Elena's breath caught. They were staring at each other, the movie forgotten. Julian's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin with infinite tenderness. Elena's lips parted, and she leaned in fractionally. Julian met her halfway, their lips a breath apart, so close Elena could feel the warmth of him. "I should," she started flustered. "I have an early shift tomorrow. I should sleep." "Of course," Julian said, and he couldn't quite hide his disappointment. "Good night, Elena." "Good night, Julian," she said. She went to her room and leaned against the closed door, her heart pounding. This was getting dangerous. She was falling harder every day, and the fear of getting hurt again, of making another mistake, was almost paralyzing. In his room, Julian lay in bed, aching for her in ways that had nothing to do with his injuries. Around 2 a.m., they both stood at their respective bedroom doors, hands on the handles, wanting to go to each other. Neither did. But the next morning, Julian found a note on the kitchen counter in Elena's handwriting. "Thank you for 7 perfect days. Whatever happens next, I want you to know you've already given me something no one else ever has. You've made me believe in good men again." Julian held the note and felt his chest expand with emotion so intense it was almost painful. He texted Silas. "I'm going to marry her." Silas's response. "You haven't even kissed her yet, Julian." "I'm still going to marry her." That same morning, while Elena was at work, she received a call from a lawyer named Harrison Grant. She almost didn't answer, assuming it was another wrong number, but something made her pick up. "Miss Hayes, I'm calling regarding your grandmother's estate." Elena frowned. "My grandmother died 2 years ago. The estate was already settled." "There was a legal complication," Mr. Grant explained. "A contested clause that's finally been resolved through the courts. You're the sole heir to $12 million and a property estate in Houston." Elena almost dropped her phone. She had to sit down in the hospital break room, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry. Did you say 12 million? "Yes, Miss Hayes. Your grandmother was quite wealthy. The property alone is worth 8 million. There are also investment accounts, stocks, and liquid assets. The estate is yours." Elena sat in stunned silence as Mr. Grant explained the details, the legal battle that had delayed the inheritance, the documentation she'd need to sign. When the call finally ended, she stared at her phone in disbelief. $12 million. She could open the free clinic she'd always dreamed of, the one in Leo's memory. She could help hundreds, thousands of people who couldn't afford health care. She could change lives. When she got home that evening, bursting with the news, Julian was sitting on the couch reading investment reports. He looked up when she came in and immediately saw her excitement. "What happened?" he asked, standing carefully. "Julian, I just found out. I inherited money from my grandmother. $12 million in property. I can't believe it's real." Julian's face lit up with genuine joy. He crossed to her and pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of his ribs. "Elena, that's incredible. You can open that free clinic you told me about, the one for Leo. When someone you're falling for is genuinely happy about your sudden wealth, rather than threatened or calculating, does that prove their feelings are real? Or do you still question their motives until they demonstrated through actions over time?" "I can't believe this is happening," Elena said. But even as she celebrated, a horrible thought crept in. She pulled back from Julian's embrace. "Did you know about this?" Julian looked confused. "What? No, how would I know about your inheritance?" "You're a billionaire," Elena said, hating herself for the suspicion, but unable to stop it. "You have resources, private investigators. Did you know I was inheriting money?" Understanding dawned on Julian's face, followed by hurt. "Elena, no, I swear on my life, I had no idea." "Because Sterling knew," Elena said, and her voice was rising. "Somehow he must have known. That's why he targeted me. What if this whole thing was—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Julian gripped her shoulders gently. "Stop, look at me. I fell in love with you when you were a nurse who saved my life in an alley. I didn't know your last name. I didn't know anything about you except that you were brave and kind and saw me as a person instead of a bank account. That's the woman I fell in love with." His voice was fierce, intense, leaving no room for doubt. "I don't care if you have $12 million or $12 Elena. I'd love you either way. You could lose every penny tomorrow, and it wouldn't change how I feel about you." "How do I know what's real anymore?" Elena asked, and tears were streaming down her face. "How do I trust my own judgment? I thought Sterling loved me, and it was all a lie." Julian did something that shocked her. He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer right there, putting it on speaker. "Harrison," Julian said when the lawyer answered, "I need you to draft an ironclad prenuptial agreement. If Elena Hayes and I ever marry, I waive all rights to her assets, inheritance, and any future income. Her money is completely untouchable by me, legally protected in every possible way, and I want it done tonight." "Julian, that's highly unusual," Harrison said over the speaker. "I don't care," Julian said. "Do it." He hung up and took Elena's hands in his. "I don't want your money, I never will. I want your heart, but only if you give it freely, without fear, without doubt. Only if you know beyond any shadow that I love you for exactly who you are." Elena broke down completely. Julian held her while she sobbed, one hand stroking her hair, the other rubbing circles on her back. "I love you," Elena finally said against his chest. "God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me." Julian pulled back just enough to tilt her face up toward his. "I love you too, and I'm going to spend every day proving you can trust me. Every single day for the rest of our lives, if you'll let me." He kissed her then, finally, after weeks of almost and nearly and not quite. His lips met hers softly at first, questioning, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. But Elena made a sound low in her throat and pressed closer, her hands coming up to frame his face. The kiss deepened, turned desperate. All the longing and fear and hope of the past weeks poured into that connection. Julian's hand slid into her hair, and Elena's found his waist, careful of his ribs, but needing to touch him to feel the reality of him. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "Hi," Julian whispered. "Hi," Elena whispered back. And then she was laughing and crying at the same time. Julian lifted her, wincing slightly but not caring about his ribs, and Elena wrapped her legs around his waist. They kissed again, deeper, hotter, stumbling toward his bedroom. "I'd trade every skyscraper for the way you breathe when I kiss your neck. You're my home, Elena, forever." Then Elena's phone rang, shattering the moment for the third time. "Ignore it," Julian said against her lips. "It might be the hospital," Elena said reluctantly. She checked the screen. Unknown number again. Voicemail notification. Curious and slightly annoyed, she pulled up the voicemail and put it on speaker. Sterling's voice filled the room, cold and calculated. "Elena, congratulations on your inheritance. I knew about it months ago. That's how we met. Remember? I accidentally bumped into you at that coffee shop. Nothing about us was an accident. I researched you, found out about your grandmother's contested estate, and positioned myself perfectly." Elena felt sick. Julian's hands tightened on her waist. "But here's what you don't know," Sterling continued. "I've been tracking you. I know you're living with Julian Vance. I know you've fallen for him, and I know that in 3 days there's an engagement party that was never officially canceled, the one I planned months ago at that venue in the hill country. I've invited all your family, all your friends, your mother, everyone who matters to you. They're expecting to celebrate our love." Julian's expression turned murderous. "If you don't show up and publicly choose me, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman you are." Sterling said, "I have photos. Elena, compromising photos that I fabricated of you and several men, doctored, but convincing enough to destroy your reputation. And Julian Vance, his squeaky clean billionaire image. I'll ruin that too. I'll claim he used his wealth to seduce my fiancé, that he paid you to leave me. By the time I'm done, neither of you will be able to show your faces in Austin." The voicemail continued, each word more poisonous. 3 days, Elena. The party. Be there. Say yes to me in front of everyone and I'll disappear quietly from your life. You can have your billionaire and your inheritance. Refuse, and I'll burn both your lives to the ground. I'll be waiting." The voicemail ended. Elena was shaking. Julian was furious. His jaw clenched so tight she could see muscles jumping. "He's bluffing," Julian said. "Let me handle this. 1 phone call and I can have him arrested for harassment, blackmail, a dozen other charges." "No," Elena said firmly. "If you use your wealth and power to solve this, it proves his point that I ran to a billionaire for protection, that I'm exactly what he'll claim I am." "I don't care what he thinks," Julian said. "I care about keeping you safe." "I need to face him myself," Elena said. "I need to end this on my terms, not yours. I need to prove to myself, if no one else, that I'm not a victim anymore." "Then I'm coming with you," Julian said, and his voice left no room for argument. "Elena, this could get ugly. I don't care if it gets nuclear," Julian said. "I've let him hurt you enough. I'm not letting you walk into his trap alone. We face him together or not at all." Elena saw the determination in his eyes, and knew arguing was pointless. "Together," she agreed. What they didn't know was that Sterling had no intention of a peaceful resolution. He was already preparing for violence, already planning how to destroy them both if Elena refused him. 3 days later, they drove to the Hill Country venue, a beautiful barn event space surrounded by magnolia trees and rolling hills. Elena's mother and extended family were already there, confused but excited because Sterling had told them the engagement was back on, that it was a surprise reconciliation. When Elena and Julian walked in hand, the crowd went silent. Elena's mother rushed forward. "Elena, what's going on? Sterling said you two reconciled," she said. She trailed off, looking between Elena and Julian with growing understanding. "Mom," Elena said gently, "Sterling and I are not getting married. We broke up weeks ago." He lied to all of you." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sterling emerged from the barn looking devastatingly handsome in a crisp charcoal suit. Every inch the wronged fiancé. "Elena," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thank you for coming. I know we've had our troubles. I know I made mistakes, but I believe love conquers all. I'm willing to forgive your affair with this man, willing to start fresh. All I need is for you to say yes, right here, right now, in front of everyone who loves us." He pulled out a ring box with practiced theatricality, dropped to one knee. The crowd was torn, some looking sympathetic to Sterling, others confused and uncomfortable. Elena felt Julian tense beside her. She squeezed his hand. "I didn't have an affair," Elena said clearly. "I ended our engagement when I found out you were cheating on me, when I discovered you'd targeted me for my inheritance, when I realized our entire relationship was built on lies." Sterling stood smoothly. "And who told you these lies? Your billionaire savior? The man who's been following you, manipulating you, using his wealth to seduce you away from me?" Julian stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Elena and Sterling. "She's not yours to claim. She never was." "And who are you?" Sterling asked, his voice rising. "Her rebound, her meal ticket. You think you're better than me because you have money?" "I'm better than you because I actually love her," Julian said calmly. "Love?" Sterling laughed harshly. "You've known her for a month. I've been with her for 2 years. I know her. I built a life with her. I was there when she worked double shifts and came home exhausted. I was there when she cried about patients she couldn't save. Where were you?" "I've known her for a month," Julian said, and his voice carried across the silent crowd. "And in that time, I've learned more about who she really is than you cared to discover in 2 years. I know she became a nurse to honor her brother, Leo. I know she takes her coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar because it reminds her of her grandmother. I know she hums when she cooks jollof rice, and that she checks on her patients even after her shift ends because she can't stop caring." He took a step forward, his intensity radiating through every word. "I know she's afraid of trusting people because everyone she's ever loved has let her down," Julian continued. "I know she smiles when she helps people, but it doesn't reach her eyes when she's truly happy. It lights up her whole face. I know that when she saved me in that alley, she didn't see a rich man or a poor man. She saw a human being who needed help. That's who she is. That's the woman I fell in love with." The crowd was silent, moved. Elena had tears streaming down her face. "You're right about one thing," Julian said to Sterling. "You gave her 2 years, 2 years of manipulation, lies, and control, and in 1 month I showed her what real love looks like. Not because I'm better than you, but because I see her. I value her. I would die before I let anyone hurt her the way you have." Elena stepped beside Julian, taking his hand. She looked at Sterling with clear eyes. "You asked me to choose," she said. "So I'm choosing. I choose myself. I choose my own happiness. I choose a man who looks at me like I'm precious instead of profitable. I choose Julian." She turned to the crowd, to her mother who was crying. "I'm sorry you came here expecting a celebration." Elena said, "But the only thing I'm celebrating today is freedom. Freedom from a man who never loved me for who I am. And if anyone has a problem with my choice, you can leave now." No one moved. Her mother pushed through the crowd and pulled Elena into a fierce hug. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "I pushed you toward him because I thought he was stable. I was wrong." "It's okay, Mom," Elena said. "You didn't know." Her mom pulled back and looked at Julian, really seeing him for the first time. "You protected my daughter." "I always will," Julian said. "If she'll let me." Her mom nodded slowly, approval in her eyes. Sterling's expression had gone from charming to cold to something darker. When everyone's attention was on Elena and her mother, he reached into his jacket. Elena saw it first, the glint of metal. "Gun!" she screamed. Everything happened at once. People scattered, screaming. Julian immediately moved to shield Elena, pushing her behind him. Sterling raised the weapon, his mask completely shattered. "You took everything from me," Sterling snarled, aiming at Julian. "My future, my money, my woman. So I'm taking what you love most." Before he could fire, Maya's voice cut through the chaos. "Sterling, stop." Everyone turned. Maya stood near the barn entrance, phone raised high, clearly recording. "I've been recording this entire conversation," Maya said loudly. "Your confession about the fake photos you threatened, the manipulation, the targeting Elena for her inheritance, everything. And it's already uploaded to the cloud and sent to the police." Sirens wailed in the distance. Julian's security team, who'd been positioned discreetly around the venue, had called law enforcement the moment Sterling pulled the weapon. "Oh, you're done," Maya said. Sterling's hand shook. His eyes darted between Julian, Elena, Maya, the crowd. His perfect plan unraveling. "If I can't have you," he said to Elena, his voice breaking, "no one can." He swung the gun toward her. Julian didn't think, didn't hesitate. He lunged, covering Elena's body with his own, just as the shot rang out. But Sterling never got the shot off. Julian's security team tackled him from behind at the exact moment he squeezed the trigger. The bullet went wild, slamming into a wooden beam. Sterling, Clear's throat hit the ground hard, the gun skittering away. He was screaming, thrashing, completely unhinged as security restrained him. "She's mine. She'll always be mine. Let me go." Police arrived seconds later, taking custody. As they hauled Sterling to his feet in handcuffs, he locked eyes with Elena one last time. "You'll regret this," he said coldly. "You'll miss me. You'll realize I was the only one who ever truly saw you." Elena stepped forward, Julian's arm around her waist, supporting her. "The only thing I regret is not seeing through you sooner. Goodbye, Sterling." He was shoved into a police car and driven away, still screaming her name. In the aftermath, Elena was shaking uncontrollably. Julian held her while paramedics checked them both for injuries. Neither was hurt physically, but emotionally Elena was fracturing. "He almost killed you," she sobbed. You threw yourself in front of me." "But he didn't," Julian said fiercely, gripping her face in both hands. "I'm here. You're here. We're safe." "You could have died for me." "And I'd do it again," Julian said. "Every time without hesitation, don't you understand? You're everything to me. Everything." Her mom approached, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Julian with new understanding. "You protected my daughter," she said. "You put yourself between her and a bullet." "I will always protect her," Julian said again. She pulled him into a hug, then Elena, then both of them together. The police needed statements. The investigation took hours. Officers assured them that with Maya's recording, the multiple witnesses, and the attempted murder charge, Sterling would be going away for 15 to 20 years minimum. It was finally over. As they left the venue that evening, Elena turned to Julian in the parking lot under the magnolia trees. "Take me home," she said. "Your place or mine?" Julian asked. Elena smiled, real and bright and reaching her eyes. "Ours." 3 months passed. Sterling was formally charged and awaiting trial, held without bail given the severity of the charges and his clear intent to harm. Elena moved permanently into the guest house, though she spent most nights in Julian's bed wrapped in his arms. They built a life together slowly and carefully. Elena used part of her inheritance to open the Leo Hayes Community Health Clinic in East Austin, a beautiful facility offering free health care to underserved communities. Julian volunteered there 3 days a week, doing patient intake and administrative work. Just another person helping. Their engagement happened quietly, privately. Julian proposed in the kitchen while Elena was cooking jollof rice, and he was still terrible at chopping onions. No grand gesture, no expensive restaurant, just Julian on one knee with his grandmother's ring asking if she'd spend the rest of her life with him. Elena said yes before he finished the question. The wedding was small and intimate, held beneath the magnolia trees at the Hill Country venue, the same place Sterling had tried to destroy them. They reclaimed it, made it theirs, filled it with love instead of fear. 50 people attended, family and close friends only. Elena walked down the aisle in a simple, elegant white dress, magnolia blossoms woven into her natural curls. Julian stood at the altar in a simple suit, tears streaming down his face as the love of his life approached. Her mom walked beside Elena. When the officiant asked who gives this woman, she said clearly, "She gives herself, but we support her choice with all our hearts." Elena stepped forward and took Julian's hands. They were both crying, both smiling. The officiant nodded to Julian. "Your vows." Julian took a shaking breath. "Elena, the first time I saw you, I was broken, literally and figuratively. You walked into that alley and saved my life without knowing who I was or what I could give you. You saw a man who needed help, and you helped him. Since that night, you've saved me 100 more times. From my loneliness, from my emptiness, from believing I'd never be loved for just being me." His voice was thick with emotion, but he didn't stop. "I promise to spend every day of my life earning the gift you've given me. Your trust, your love, your heart." Julian continued. "I promise to protect you, cherish you, and see you, really see you, the way you've always deserved to be seen. I promise that whether we have everything or nothing, as long as I have you, I have enough. You saved me, Elena. Now, let me spend my life saving you back, not from danger, but from ever doubting how extraordinary you are. I love you completely, eternally as I am." Elena was sobbing openly. She squeezed his hands and found her voice. "Julian, you walked into my life when I'd forgotten what it felt like to be valued," she said. "I was so lost in trying to be enough for the wrong person that I forgot what the right person should feel like. You reminded me. You saw me not as a nurse, not as someone with or without money, not as broken or whole, just as Elena, and you loved that person." She smiled through her tears. "I promise to always see you the same way," Elena said. "Not as a billionaire, not as my savior, just as Julian, the man who makes me laugh, who holds me when I cry, who would throw himself in front of danger to keep me safe. I promise to trust you even when my past makes it hard. I promise to build a future with you, where we both choose each other every single day. You taught me that love isn't about what someone can give you. It's about who you become when you're with them. I'm the best version of myself when I'm with you. I love you, Julian Vance, with everything I am." The officiant barely got out by the power vested in me before Julian pulled Elena into a deep, passionate kiss. The crowd cheered. Maya whooped. Silas wiped tears discreetly. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Julian whispered against her lips, "Hi, wife." Elena grinned. "Hi, husband." 6 months after the wedding, Elena stood outside the Leo Hayes Community Health Clinic, cutting a ribbon for the official grand opening. The building was beautiful, modern, but warm, with Leo's photo prominently displayed in the lobby. Julian stood beside her in jeans and a button-down, because they'd both decided to leave the billionaire aesthetic for galas and keep their real life normal. He volunteered at the clinic regularly, and patients loved him because he listened, really listened, and never made anyone feel less than. Their life was a blend of both worlds. They split time between a modest ranch house Elena had chosen with land and horses and room to breathe, and occasionally used Julian's resources for good, funding clinics, creating scholarship programs, supporting communities. The final scene of their story happened on an ordinary evening 6 months after the clinic opened. Elena was in their kitchen cooking jollof rice, while music played softly. Julian was attempting to help. Still terrible at chopping after all this time. "You know, for a billionaire, you're still a terrible cook," Elena said, bumping him with her hip. "Good thing I married a woman who loves me despite my flaws," Julian said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I married you because of your flaws," Elena said, leaning back into his chest. "They make you real." Julian turned her around gently. "Dance with me." "There's no music," Elena protested. "There's always music when I'm with you," Julian said. They slow danced in the kitchen. No music except their heartbeats and the slight sizzle of rice on the stove. Julian's hands were gentle on her waist, Elena's arms around his neck. They swayed together, foreheads touching, eyes closed, completely at peace. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet, was a grainy security camera image from the night Elena had saved Julian in the alley, the moment that started everything. Beneath it, a handwritten note in Julian's writing, "The night I stopped existing and started living." And beside it, in Elena's writing, "The night I saved a stranger and found my home." They continued dancing, wrapped in each other's arms, backlit by warm kitchen light. Two people who'd been lost and broken, who'd found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful in the light. Outside, the Texas sky turned orange and violet with sunset. Inside, Julian and Elena danced, loved, lived, and they were finally, truly, completely home. The end. My beautiful, amazing Pride family. Thank you all for having me this year, and I'm grateful to each and every one of you for tuning into my stories. Thank you for all the support you've shown me through liking, commenting, sharing, criticizing when necessary, and motivating me to do better. You guys are the real MVPs. Happy New Year in advance. Let's meet again in 2026. Lots of love. The deep moral lesson. This story teaches us that status is a shadow, but character is the sun. We often spend our lives building towers of wealth, titles, and social standing, only to realize that these towers cast a shadow that hides our true selves. Julian Vance had billions, but he was starving for the only currency that matters: unconditional visibility. He had to strip away his armor of gold to discover if his soul was still worth loving. The profound lesson is that altruism is the highest form of human recognition. When Elena saved a nobody in an alley, she proved that human value is inherent, not earned. She didn't check Julian's bank account before risking her life. She simply saw a human being in pain. True love, therefore, is not found in the calculation of what someone can do for us, but in the quiet, selfless moments where we choose another person's well-being over our own safety or gain. In the end, we learn that home is not a place, but the heart that recognizes your true name. To be loved for who you are, rather than what you have, is the only success that can truly fill an empty penthouse. Never let the glitter of the world blind you to the gold in a person's spirit.